Hello Nidorinas and Nidorinos, I'm KingNido, and today it is the Laverre Constrictors going up against the Holon Allies, and as they both have a look through their opening hands, let's have a look at this tale of the tape between these two sides who are sitting well outside of victory road at the moment, neither of them being in the top 5, and for the Holon Allies, they are yet to win a game this season, unable to produce the energy that they need, as it was last season that the Allies were actually able to take down the Constrictors, and they're looking to do that again. So with that said, let us know in the comments below who you think is going to win this matchup. Will it be the Psychic decks? Will it be the Rainbow decks? Let's go!
3, 2, 1, go!
And it is going to be that Spring Path deck of the Holon Allies, and they've got the Abra that they're moving into that active spot, as well as the Giratina on the bench, and there is a Giratina going into the active spot for this Distortion World deck of the Constrictors with the Clefairy on the bench as well. We could see two Giratinas go head to head in this game, one of our best of 3 series, but the Allies are going first, and they do pull that Giant Cape. Now they do have 2 Alakazams and that Pokemon Center Lady in hand. They still need the Kadabra, but they send it over to the Constrictors, who pull their second Clefable. They've got the other one in hand, but they play that Professor's Research, getting another 2 cards. They get the Rotom and they get the second Giratina. They've also got that Rocky Helmet in hand as they move the Rotom onto the bench, and that Rocky Helmet does go onto that active Giratina who is in its origin form, as well as getting its first energy. With that Levitate ability now, it has no retreat cost, as it is normally 3 if it didn't have any attached to it, but there is the X speed being pulled for the Holon Allies, and they have just generated a Psychic energy. This Spring Path deck does generate Psychic and Grass energies. They do have the Leafeon and Eevee in there somewhere in that deck, as they play their Giant Cape to give this Abra an extra 20 health. Now this Psyshot does do 20 damage, but if they go for it, it is going to get that 20 recall from the Rocky Helmet, so they need to weigh up their options. They're yet to get the Kadabra in hand, so they send it over to the Constrictors with no offense, and they do pull the Haunter. They're yet to pull a Ghastly or a Gengar, but that one of those 2 Clefables with that Moonblast has come online for the Constrictors. It also requires 3 energy, as the Giratina does get its second, and the Allies are going to pull the Pokeball. They can get a basic card out of their deck right now, and it is going to be that Eevee. Now they have generated a Grass energy, and it will be the same on the next turn as well. And this is the thing with these Rainbow decks, they can't guarantee that they're going to get the energy they need in that moment, and it can be very costly for them, and it has cost them a few times this season, but they have absolute power if they can get these online, as it does go with the Abra and that Psyshot doing 20 damage to the Giratina, but that Rocky Helmet does the 20 damage back, and this actually puts the Abra in elimination range of the Giratina, as the Constrictors have just pulled their Gengar. The Spooky Shot is coming, and it takes that Abra off of the board, and the Constrictors get the first point. And as we said at the start, this is a best of 3 series, but regardless of the outcome of these first 2 games, we always play out that 3rd game, because it does count toward the Season A2 leaderboard, as that second Eevee is pulled for the Allies. They've just moved their first Eevee into that active spot, the second one now going onto the bench, also getting its first energy. This quick attack does 10 damage, but if they flip their heads, it will do an additional 20, and they are able to get that 30 damage on to the Giratina. Once again though, that Rocky Helmet does do 20 damage back to it, but the Eevee is an easy target, only having 60 max health. That Giratina can take it out in 1 turn, as the second Rotom has been pulled and Clefable gets its first energy. They think of moving the Rotom onto the bench as well, but decide against that, just going with another Spooky Shot, and they wipe the Eevee off the board, and just like that, this Distortion World deck has already taken 2 points from the Holon Allies, who put that Eevee into the active spot, and they finally pull that Kadabra that would have been very beneficial for them a long time ago, and they are going to get another Grass energy, this time going on to that Giratina with that Crisis Dive still on the bench. It does need at least 1 Psychic energy as well, but they have switched it into the active spot. They don't want to give up that 3rd and final point. They've retreated the Eevee, not using the X speed either, as the Constrictors have just pulled their Pokeball. They are going to play that, and they get the Ghastly out of their deck, so now they've got that whole Gengar line in hand, and they are going to move that Ghastly into the final bench position. Ghastly does get its first energy as another Spooky Shot, this time onto that Giratina, taking it down to 50 health. It is an easy target right now for the Constrictors, as the Allies have just pulled the Leafeon, and we can see that on the next turn, they are going to generate a Psychic Energy, and that's what this active Giratina does need. It gets that second energy, being the Grass Energy. They play the Pokemon Center Lady, so it's going to restore 30 health, taking it up to 80, so it is actually able to outlast the Spooky Shot from the Constrictor's origin form Giratina, and it is the Clefairy being pulled for the Constrictors. Now their bench is full, but that Haunter now coming online on top of that Ghastly. And they are going to go with the Clefable, getting its second energy here, as well as another Spooky Shot is going to take the Giratina from this Spring Path deck down to 10 health. We have this Giratina v Giratina face-off, but Allies have just pulled their Professor's Research, and they are going to play it. They get another 2 cards, they get the Abra, and they get a second X speed here. They immediately move that Abra onto the bench, but they do get the Psychic Energy onto the Giratina. It can go for this Crisis Dive. It will take down the opposing Giratina, but with that said, that Rocky Helmet will take it out and give the win to the Laverre Constrictors in this game 1. The Holon Allies need to make a decision. Do they want to get a point on the board, or do they just want to give up this game here as well? Because that is what will happen. They really need to weigh up their options. That could be a risky play, giving up game 1. The Constrictors will be happy to take that point regardless of how they can get it. And the Allies are going for the Crisis Dive, 120 damage, taking down the Constrictor's Giratina, but that Rocky Helmet does the return 20, so both Giratinas fall at the same time. Neither of them seems to be the superior one, but with that said, the Distortion Wheel deck of the Constrictors does win game 1 in this best of 3 series, but we have a table reset as we do go into game 2, and it is going to be the Allies once again going first. This time they're going with their Champion's Path deck. It does generate those Fighting and Water Energy as they move the Shaman Skyform into that active spot. The Constrictors have the Duskull and that Azelf in hand as they're thinking about who they want to move into the active spot. They do have those 2 Dusclops in their hand, plus another Rocky Helmet. It is the Azelf in the active spot, the Duskull onto the bench, and the Allies have the Irida, the Glaceon, the Garchomp, and their own Rocky Helmet in hand as well. And they do pull the Professor's Research, so once again they go into thin their deck, getting another 2 cards out. They get the Pokeball, they get an Eevee, they can get another basic Pokemon into their hand immediately, and it is going to be the Gibble that they pull, and it is the Dragon type Gibble. They've got the Ground type one in there as well. Sorry, not the Ground type, it is the Fighting type. Let's not get confused with VGC and TCG, as the Rocky Helmet is put onto the Shaman, and we saw what that did in the previous game as they send it over to the Constrictors, who pull the Dust Noir. So they've got the entire Dust Noir line in hand as they get an energy onto the Azelf plus the Rocky Helmet. Now this Psychic Arrow can do 20 damage to any of the opposing Pokemon, even those on the bench. They are not safe from this Azelf, so they can avoid the Rocky Helmet of the Shaman. They go with the Psychic Arrow on to the Gibble. They don't want to have to contend with that Garchomp, as it is the Gabite being pulled for the Holon Allies, and that is the Fighting type Gabite, who does require 1 Fighting energy, but that is exactly what is produced from that energy zone of the Allies. But they do require a Water Energy onto the Garchomp as well if it wants to go for that Dragon Claw, and the Glaceon comes online for the Allies as the Constrictors do pull their Mesprit, and they immediately move that onto the bench. It does require 3 energy, as does the Dusclops that just comes online as well, and the Dust Noir also requires 3 energy. Now with that Mesprit, it can do 160 damage, but it does require the Azelf and the Uxie to both be on the bench, and it is the Azelf continuing with the Psychic Arrow onto the Gabite. They're trying to rid themselves of having to contend with a Garchomp as the second one is pulled for the Allies, and we can see their next energy in the coming turn will be a Water Energy. They do move this Fighting Energy onto the active Shaman. And that Garchomp is online. They're looking at that Reckless Shearing ability where they can discard a card in hand if they want to take one from the top of their deck, but they opt against it as the Constrictors pull the Cyrus. They can drag that Garchomp into the active spot as it has taken damage. The Dust Noir is online as well, but it is the second energy going onto the Mesprit, who can take most Pokemon in Season A2 out with 1 hit. That Psychic Arrow continues onto that benched Garchomp. They want the Allies to have to use up their energy, and the Allies have just pulled the Cynthia, who pairs perfectly with this Garchomp. It does increase the damage of that Dragon Claw by an extra 50, but they do play the Irida, who restores 40 health from the Garchomp because it is holding a Water Energy, and they are going to retreat the Shaman. This Garchomp can unleash with this Dragon Claw. The Azelf, the Uxie, the Mesprit, they all have 70 health, so they are easy targets, and the Azelf is the first to fall as the allies get a point here in game 2. There is that recoil damage from the Rocky Helmet onto the Garchomp, but the Constrictors need to think about how they want to approach this. And they have moved the Dusknoir into the active spot. They don't know that Cynthia is in hand for the allies as the second Azelf has been pulled for the Constrictors. They really need to think about how they want to approach this, because that Dusknoir is not safe and they don't know that yet. They must be aware that Cynthia is in that deck though, as the allies pull their second Eevee. I don't think that's what they're concerned with though. They do generate a fighting energy that they do put onto the Shaman, and here is the Cynthia. That Dragon Claw is going to do 150 damage, and with that it will wipe the Dusknoir off the board. An incredibly powerful Pokemon right there with this Garchomp setup, taking the second point, and one more point for the allies and this Champions Path deck. They will send this to a game 3 as our decider. It is the Azelf moved into the active spot. The Uxie has been pulled for the Laverre Constrictors as well. They can get this Mesprit on line. They may be able to get themselves back into this. They do retreat that active Azelf. The Mesprit is moved, and with this Supreme Blast, 160 damage, they wipe the Garchomp off of the board. This is the opportunity that the Constrictors need. They can turn this game around. They've just taken their first point. And this does leave the allies having to decide, and they do opt to go with the Shaman in the active spot. Now, to have done that, the Mesprit did have to discard all 3 energy that were attached to it, and it is going to be another fighting energy that goes on to the Shaman. It does only do 30 damage with this flop, but that Glaceon does require 2 water energy. We can see one of them being produced on the next turn, but that flop does begin. 30 damage to the Mesprit. The Constrictors have an opportunity to try and turn this whole entire game around that they've taken out the Garchomp, who is the allies' key asset here, but they still have that Glaceon on the bench. It is the Uxie being produced thanks to that Pokeball, and it is the benched Uxie that actually receives that Psychic Energy, and they do move the second one onto the bench here as well, but they don't go... They are unable to, go with the retreat of the Mesprit, but it can outlast another hit from the Shaman. The Glaceon gets its first of 2 required water energy, so it can go for that Ice Beam. The flap continues from the Shaman, putting this Mesprit down with 10 health remaining. It is the Pokemon Communication being pulled for the Constrictors. They can send that Dusclops back into the deck to get a random card back, but they do need to retreat this Mesprit as they do just move the energy onto it. Now, they can't leave it sitting in that active spot as an easy target for the Shaman, and they are going to retreat it here. They can move that benched Uxie, who does have an energy on it, into the active spot, and they can start to chip away at the opposing Pokemon. Now, these members of the Red Chain deck, they can outlast a hit as well from Glaceon, but the Glaceon has the potential to paralyze them, and then they could be unable to move and stuck in that active spot. It is a Gabite being pulled for the Holon Allies. It is the second water energy being put onto the Glaceon, so odds are no, they're not going to go with the retreat. Instead, they're going for the flop onto that Uxie to get 30 damage onto it. This will put it in elimination range, because they know that if anyone does damage to the Shaman as well, it will get that Rocky Helmet damage, so they are going to retreat the Uxie. They move the Azelf into the active spot because it can actually target that Glaceon whilst it is on the bench. So there's that Psychic Arrow, 20 damage, but it is not enough to take out that Glaceon before the Shaman will be able to. The Gible has been pulled for the Holon Allies. They immediately put it onto the bench. They could be trying to get a second Garchomp online here because they've got the other Garchomp line in hand, but the Glaceon going into the active spot, it is going for the Ice Beam. They want that paralysis. They're trying to take this to a game 3. 60 damage onto the Azelf. It now has 10 health remaining. They need the heads to leave it paralyzed. They get the tails. This is good for the Constrictors. They want to end this in game 2. They don't want to try and risk a game 3 loss here, as they do pull the Professor's Research. They've also got that Celestic Town Elder in hand as well, who can get a random basic Pokemon from their discard pile. They just got the Pokemon Center Lady and the Dusknoir, as well as that full health Uxie does get an energy. It gets moved into the active spot, and they can now start targeting this Glaceon in the active spot and not have to worry about that Rocky Helmet. And at the same time, they get to generate an energy for that Mesprit. Again, it requires 3 energy to unleash that Supreme 160 damage, that Supreme Blast, but they get a Water Energy onto the Gible, and they've got that second Irida in hand. They get the Gabite online. They are one turn away from having the Garchomp online again for the second time in this match. They are producing the exact energies they need here. They don't play the Irida. They're confident the Glaceon is safe. 60 damage onto that active Uxie, taking it down to 10 health. Again though, they do not get the paralysis. This buys the Constrictors a little bit of time. They do pull their Duskull. They've got that Pokemon Center Lady in hand that they can use. They get energy onto that benched Uxie. They are going to switch it with the active one, and they do use the Pokemon Center Lady to get it out of elimination range from the Glaceon, but they don't know there is a Garchomp in that hand ready and waiting. The Mind Boost, 20 damage onto the Glaceon. They're going to get another energy onto that Mesprit. Again, they're trying to get that 160 damage ready, and the Cynthia has been pulled. They're going to retreat the Glaceon into the Gabite, who is now a Garchomp, and we can see that Cynthia come into play again, which means they are going to produce 150 damage to take this Uxie off the board, and the Holon Allies and this Champions Path deck have taken this to a game 3. The Constrictors were unable to turn it around. And with our final table reset here, it is going to be that coin flip determining that the Constrictors will be going first, and they're going to be using that Celestic Dream deck up against the Gold Rush deck of the Allies. They've got the Togepi and the Togetic in hand, that Togepi going into the active spot with the Cresselia on the bench. It is the Burmy for the Allies, their only basic Pokemon going into the active spot. Both these teams have got a Pokeball in hand, but the Constrictors have also got that Professor's Research. They just pulled the Drifloon as well. They're going to play the Pokeball for a basic Pokemon, and it is going to be the Unknown with that check ability, which we've seen them use many a time to check what the next card will be in their deck. They get the Togetic and a second Professor's Research thanks to their first Professor's Research, and there is that Unknown into the bench position, so they can utilize this check. They've done this all season long. They're going to want the Togekiss, but it's a second Togepi that they are going to pull the next time, but they do have that second Togetic also in hand. And with that, they end their first turn, sending it over to the Allies, who pull the Gimmighoul, and they do have a Metal Energy being generated as they play the Pokeball to get their second Burmy. Now they've got the Goldango in hand, they've also got a Probopass, and they can use that Pokemon Communication if they want to try and get a different different Pokemon card into their hand. They get a Metal Energy onto the Gimmighoul as they want to try and set up this Goldango. It seems it is the Togepi being pulled, and they play the Professor's Research before using the check. They get the second Drifloon, and they get the Cynthia. That Cynthia pairs well, not just into the Garchomp like we saw in the previous match, it goes well with the Togekiss, who will be the next card pulled for the Constrictors, so they know they should start setting up this Togetic online that gets its first energy. This Fairy Wind does do 40 damage, but it is also that Overdrive Smash of the Togekiss that they want to utilize very soon. It does 60 damage, but every following turn, every consecutive turn after that it does 120 damage, and with that Cynthia, it can do 170. We thought the 150 from that Garchomp was massive. As the Nose Pass is pulled for the Allies, it is the Goldango online, getting a fighting energy. Now, the more Metal Energy it has on it, they get a coin flip for every single one. Each heads is a 50 damage, but if it does it to something like a Togekiss or a Togetic, they are weak to the metal types. It does an additional 20 damage. As there is that Togekiss, they immediately go for the check, though they still want to know what is coming next, and they are going to be getting a giant cape. There is that Togekiss with the Overdrive Smash being moved into the active spot, and it only requires this second energy that's now on it. They put the second Togepi onto the bench. They could have two of these Togekiss set up before the end of this game, as the Overdrive Smash wipes this Burmy off the board, boosting that Overdrive Smash. It will do 120 damage. And the Allies opt to go with the Nose Pass. They want to try and buy themselves a bit of time, it seems, to set up this Goldango as they need. They have just pulled the Dawn that allows them to move an energy from their benched Pokemon to their active Pokemon, and the Probopass is online. Now, the Probopass can normally survive an Overdrive Smash even at 120 damage, but that Cynthia changes all of that as the Giant Cape has been pulled for the Constrictors. They're going for another check, potentially seeing if they've got another Togekiss in their deck coming next, but it will be the second Cresselia. However, they're still going to get that second Togetic online. They get a first energy onto the Cresselia, who does require 2 energy to go on the offensive, but there's the Giant Cape as well onto the Togekiss, taking its health up to 160, and here is the Cynthia to take this Overdrive Smash, 170 damage to wipe this Probopass off the board on the word go, and that is the second point for the Constrictors in Game 3. They are looking to take all 3 points before the Allies can even get 1. Now we can see that the Gholdengo does have the required 3 energy that it needs, and 2 of them are metal, so it will get 2 coin flips, but they're going to play the Adamant, and they needed that card because it will reduce the damage that Gholdengo takes on the next turn by 20, so Togekiss cannot actually take it out because there's no Cynthia in hand. It will only do 100 damage. Now the Allies needed 2 heads, they only get 1. It will do 70 damage if they are able, well, they should be able to, unless the Constrictors pull the Cynthia, which they don't because we knew it was going to be the Cresselia. But this Gholdengo will need to get 2 heads on the next turn if it wants to take down the Togekiss. As they can see, it will be the next Togekiss being pulled on the coming turn, so they're going to get an energy onto that Togetic. Here is the Overdrive Smash, 100 damage onto the Gholdengo, and there it is. That Gholdengo with 20 health remaining. They do pull the Mothim. They've got the Burmy in hand. Now that Burmy cannot outlast the hit from the Togekiss either. They are going to get a 3rd Metal Energy on to this Gholdengo, but they are limited on their options. They go with the coin flip, they get a tails on the first one, they get the heads on the second one, only 1. Once again, they're unable to take down this active Togekiss with all the setup. They needed as many energy as possible onto that Gholdengo. They're not worried about the second Togekiss, they're just going with this Overdrive Smash, and the Constrictors hold on and run away with it, in fact, in Game 3, as they keep the Allies unable to win a series so far this season. They are 0-5, stuck on the bottom of the leaderboard as next round they are going up against the Kitakami Rogues, whereas the Constrictors get a much needed win as next round they are going up against the Levincia Wonders. But until then, Nidorinos, thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments below what you thought the best card was, and if you enjoyed what you saw, please leave a like, share, subscribe, but more importantly, always remember, send thanks, and I'll see you when you see me.